glad that you're able to join us. Thank you, everyone. Really appreciate it. We have today a dear friend of mine, a mentor. The reason why I'm standing here, one of the reasons why I'm standing here, to be so fortunate along my journey to meet great people like Bill and so much wisdom. And, for years where he was a public company CEO, he was working on a lot of these sorts of concepts. And, now we have the pleasure to work with him here again. So Bill is the managing partner at Axes Group. He has over 35 years of experience in executive leadership and management consulting, primarily in the areas of strategy, values-driven leadership, developing high-performance teams, and cultural adaptation to a wide range of organizations from Fortune 500 to startups in a wide variety of industries. And that's probably why I love him so much, because we share that curious mind. We look at systems models and we understand how to apply it from one context to the next. And with that, Bill, I'm going to go ahead and step off stage and turn it over to you. But I am here listening. So if you need anything, let me know and I'll be happy to support you any way we can.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. And thank you, Chris, for having me. It's a pleasure to be with you. Thank you for joining me. And, as we go through this Web 3.0 unconference, you're gonna see and hear and participate in a lot of stuff. And it's going to bring up some questions and some issues and some uncertainty, and the uncertainty around, so what would it take to deliver on the challenge of Web3? And what's your role? How's it going to work? Well, I have some answers to that question in one area, the area of leadership, the human area. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. So there are two prongs to this answer. One of them is as a leader, to create a balanced organization. We'll talk about that. And the other prong is how to work with and make use of the magic of the question, what would it take? And then we'll talk about a few case studies, experiences that I've had that illustrate the point of how bringing values and cultures together to strengthen balance plays out. And we're going to emphasize today culture. So when we talk about a balanced organization, what is it? And what exactly do I mean by balance? Well, balance is a state of aligned readiness. When you are balanced, you are adaptable. You can respond to situations, whether they be opportunities or challenges, whatever the case may be. But you and your organization have the ability to see and seize and respond and perform with greater proficiency than in any other form. So what is a balanced organization? What is it and what does it look like? Well, it's organic in nature and it's composed of 6 elements. And the 6 elements are these. Excuse me. First of all, your vision. Vision is simply a current state, a future state of reality, not yet manifest. A future state of reality, not yet manifest. Values are simply your beliefs as defined by your behavior consistently over time. Your values turned inward define your culture. Turned outward, they shape your brand, the experience of your brand. Values-driven leadership is the art of having everybody in your organization live up to your values all the time, in every situation, for everybody in your entire company. Culture is the what, how, and why you do what you do. What, how, and why you do what you do. Strategies are the high-level objectives and goals that you set that drive the direction and the trajectory. I'll get that out. The trajectory of your organization. And greater purpose is why you do what you do beyond money. What is your legacy going to be? How do you want to be remembered? What difference will you make in the world? And purpose is especially important because when your purpose aligns with the purpose of your employees, your team, they are able to take ownership, that the kind of emotional ownership that gives them ownership of, or creates, I should say, ownership of your vision and your mission and your values and their jobs and their responsibilities and their commitment, because people own purpose. Financial incentives are nice, they're important, but they're transactional. Purpose creates alignment around purpose creates ownership. So, having described what a balanced organization looks like and what balance means, let's look at this question of what would it take? It's magic, and it works like nothing I've ever experienced, and it works every time. So I was first introduced to this question as a 20-year-old college student, and it was the only question on the final exam in an economics course. And the question was this: what would it take to grow the world's wheat supply in a flower pot? And that metaphorical question brought into being, in order to answer that question, we had to regurgitate all the appropriate principles and theories that we had learned throughout the semester. Now, at the time, I saw that question as just just a piece of crap, really, just an academic piece of crap. And yet somehow, somehow I remembered it, and it stayed with me, and I used it sporadically over 20 years when I remembered. And I asked it in situations that were challenging, problems, opportunities. And when I asked it, and when we addressed it, and when I addressed it, it dispelled my self-limiting beliefs. It had me thinking more creatively, and it always proved to be a catalyst for achieving beyond my expectations or the expectations of those around me. So one day, after 20 years of doing this randomly, I woke up and said, this could be a repeatable methodology. And so I made it one. And I use it all the time in every situation I'm involved in. And it works. And it works every single time. Now, I have great reliance on it. I know it, excuse me, I know it always works. But I didn't know why until recently. And in discussions with some neuroscientists, I learned that there is a neuroscientific foundation for why it works. And it works, and it goes like this. When you ask precisely the what would it take question, you remove your ego from the situation. So you're sort of asking your ego to just sort of step out of the room. When you do that, you are no longer judging or criticizing your own thoughts, and nobody else does either. So you are free to create, and you're operating like a 5-year-old child who is, before they're told and taught what they cannot do. So when your ego leaves the room, fear leaves the room, and it's amazing what kind of creative ideas bubble up under those circumstances. So let me talk about a few situations, case studies, if you will, that that I was part of, and I had the privilege of observing, where we brought into play some of the elements of balance, the what would it take question, and how it strengthened and brought about cultural change and greater performance beyond what anyone thought was possible. So, Oracle. One day I got a call from the head of the Western division of the consulting division of Oracle. He told me that he had just received an edict from their CEO. And the edict said, you will grow your business by 50% next year, 50%. And he said the bad news in that was that his people were already working 80 hours a week. And by the way, that was double the rate of their growth over the previous 2 years. They'd grown profitably at 25%. Nobody was complaining, but 50% was the new mandate. And his people were working 80 hours a week. His managers were traveling 75% of the time. Morale was in the toilet. But he went on to tell me that the good news was that based on the opportunities he saw in the marketplace, 50% was too modest. They could grow at way more than that. So we spent a whole day walking and talking and framing. And by the end of that day, we came up with this question. What would it take to grow the business at 100% while simultaneously reducing hours worked and travel time by 25%? And then we presented that to his 35 senior managers. And their reaction was, are you guys out of your mind? That's impossible. This is not going to happen. That set in motion a whole series of very deep, very penetrating, what would it take questions around their self-limiting beliefs, their confirmation bias, their fears. And we were able to dispel all of them. Fears about their inability to have the physical capacity to grow, hiring freezes that simply did not exist. And one big fear, and their stated fear, was that they would lose customers because of forcing them or selling them newer systems and technology, and they would leave because of the increased cost. Well, it turned out upon greater examination of the what would it take approach, that wasn't really the fear. The fear was really the fear and resistance that emanated from that fear among the salespeople, the consultants charged with selling, that they weren't familiar enough with the new technologies, and they were stuck in their own comfort zone of legacy systems that were soon becoming obsolete. When we dispelled that fear, they were able to present and sell with greater ease and confidence. So fast forward a year. Well, first of all, let me step back. What came of that process was two plans. There was the 50% growth plan that was submitted to corporate headquarters. It's what the CEO asked for. And then there was the other plan, the 100% growth plan, the what would it take plan. And that was a plan that was used to run the business. So fast forward a year. At the end of the succeeding year, they grew at 72%. While simultaneously decreasing hours worked and travel time by 25%. 72%. 40% greater than the CEO had requested. Corporate was ecstatic. They were ecstatic. Morale was off the charts. People were heroes. Now, it's true that they did not grow at 100%, but there's another principle at work here that is important to use, remember and use in this what would it take process. And it's this: to achieve the impossible, it's my principle, I should know it. To achieve the improbable, you must first envision the impossible. To achieve the improbable, first envision the impossible. And that's what they did. So keep in mind, their reaction to all of this at the initial phase was, this is impossible. And yet, here it was. In another situation at Toshiba, in the they're in the manufacturing group that made their copying equipment. We did a pilot program involving 20 copier dealers around the United States, and they all shared one seemingly insurmountable barrier. They could not close their presentations to new customers, new prospects. They could not close more than 25%. That was it. And no matter what they tried, and more training, whatever they did, it didn't work. And so we asked a series of they asked a series of what would it take questions. And as a result of asking those questions, they came up collectively with a new approach to selling. And that new approach involved including service technicians in the selling process. Why? Because their prospective customers' greatest need and greatest desire had to do with the quality of after-sales service, and who better to deliver that message than a service tech? So enough service techs liked it and were good at it. The salespeople embraced it. They used it. Fast forward. Oh, and stepping back a minute, their what would it take question was, what would it take for us to double our closing rate, go from 25% to 50%? Fast forward a year. Their closing rate on presentations to new prospects went from 25% to 75%. That one change ushered in an entirely new set of cultural behaviors and the way salespeople and service techs coordinated and worked together. It changed the culture. An example of leadership using and strengthening a balanced organization, some of the elements of a balanced organization. And finally, there was a case of Thermador. Now, Thermador, as most of you know, is a manufacturer of high-end kitchen appliances, and they had a vision: revolutionize the premium home appliance business. That was their vision. However, they had a problem. Their new product development process took them 3 years to come out with a new product. That's not exactly a revolutionary pace. So their goal, they asked the question, what would it take to reduce our new product development time from 3 years to 18 months? That in turn triggered a whole host of what would it take questions. And in the process of asking those what would it take questions, they discovered one major initial barrier, and that barrier was trust. There was great mistrust between the product development team and a few of their critical outside suppliers, metal bending companies. So they had this issue of mistrust between the development team and the metal benders. So we asked, what would it take? They got to a clean sheet of paper. They were able to resolve that issue and developed a new, or entered, I should say, a new era of mutual trust. That enabled them to bring the metal benders into the development team and involve them much earlier in the development process. That one step shortened their product development time by 6 months. Now, there were other barriers, other challenges. We asked the same kind of what would it take questions, involving some of the issues involved marketing, some of the issues involved adhering to hard deadlines on various phases of the development process. Anyway, within the span of a year, they were able to reduce their new product development time from 3 years to 1 year. Goal was 18 months, 1 year. In the process, they ushered in a whole new set of cultural norms, new behaviors, they redefine their culture, but most importantly, their vision and their product development process were now in sync. Now, there's an interesting common thread here among all three companies, three very different companies, different industries, different set of problems, and yet there's a common thread. And that common thread was that all of the leaders of those companies were not willing to allow their future to be dictated by their self-limiting beliefs lodged in their past. They were not willing to let the past be the arbiter of their future. And that's the magic of having a balanced organization and having this what would it take mentality. When you create a balanced organization, first of all, let's go all the way back to what balance is. The balanced organization is not a structure. It's context. Context, the frame, the sandbox in which you play whatever game you're playing. Now, when you do that, when you create that framework, that context, and you marry it with all of the elements and the processes that define how you operate your business, and you marry those two seamlessly together, you have created an organic whole that allows you to achieve at your highest potential. Now, the Web3 world that we're entering, there's an awful lot of technology involved, and it's important. But, there's still plenty of companies who operate in the same way. I mean, they still make stuff, they still sell this stuff, whether they're B2B or B2C. And, the fact that the Web3 world introduces so much more in a way of technology that allows us to be collaborative, that co-creative. It promotes co-ownership, but it's not going to mean the demise of capitalism or the free enterprise system or the stock market. Those things are still going to exist. We're going to move into Web3 incrementally. It's not going to just drop in overnight, and that's the new reality. So when we talk about leadership and the models that I brought up as being old school, they are old school, but old school leadership is not going away. If you're leading a company, if you're part of a leadership team, you still have to be a great leader. You have to have great leadership skills, and your organization has to work to its highest potential. The balanced organization is the best way I know of getting it there. Now, we developed this at Axes. It's not the product of research or academic experiments, although those things are important. And we use a lot of neuroscience and behavioral science and emotional intelligence in the way we've developed and implement the Axes model. So a couple of things I'm thinking about. So, what can you do? What might be some steps you could take to use what we've talked about today to your advantage? Well, first of all, my first suggestion is this: do a self-assessment. If you've got an established company, assess how the elements of balance that we talked about earlier, how they relate, how they work together, how strong they are independently and collectively within your organization. By doing that, you'll give yourself a much stronger foundation, a more intelligent basis that you can use in the way you allocate resources, in the way you plan your future. And if you're a startup company and you don't have this structure yet, design it. Use the balanced organization model to design it the way you would like it to be. Now, at Axes, we've developed an assessment tool that we have used very, very successfully. It's delivered great value to our clients in terms of helping them do exactly what I just described. So here's my offer. Jump on our website at Axis Group, or I think Ad Hocnium. You can do it on Ad Hocnium. Calendar a conversation. I'll be happy to sit with you for an hour, no charge, no obligation. We can talk about anything you want to talk about, whether it's more information about what an assessment is, whether it's how does the what would it take question work, taking a deeper dive into any of the elements of balance that you want to talk about, anything you want to talk about. It's just an hour discussion. I promise you, you'll come away from that hour much more informed and better prepared, whether you want to go forward internally or use resources, external resources you already have. Whatever you want to do, you're going to do it more intelligently. Now,
Hey, Bill, let me interrupt here just for a second. Why don't you go ahead and bring it home and inspire some people as you've inspired me?
well, it's just this simple, Chris and everybody. What we're giving birth to in the Web3 world is a kind of new pledge of allegiance with financial and economic liberty and justice for more than have ever experienced it before. So embrace this new technology. Embrace it be all in, because it will enable you within the context of new cultures, new forms and norms and means and methods for co-creating and co-owning to reach levels of success that beyond anything we've ever achieved or have yet conceived. Web3 is progressive. It's not in a political sense. It's progressive in its purpose. And that purpose will allow so many more deserving people to earn it, own it, be a part of it, co-create, and become it can become the essence of a life well lived. So keep asking, what would it take? What would it take? Ask it in a grand sense, ask it in a granular sense, and together we'll unlock the answers.